Mr. President, Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates and representatives, today, in addressing this session of the United Nations General Assembly, I feel oppressed by a great sense of responsibility. I feel a humility in speaking to this august gathering of wise and experienced statesmen from east and west, from the north and from the south, from old nations and from young nations, and from nations newly reawakened from a long sleep. I have prayed to the Almighty that my tongue will find those words which are adequate to express the feelings of my heart. And I have prayed also that these words will bring an echo from the hearts of those who listen. It is my great pleasure to congratulate the President upon his appointment to his high and constructive office. It is also my great pleasure, on behalf of my nation, to offer a most heartfelt welcome to the 16 new members of the United Nations. Now, today, I address the leaders of nations and the builders of nations. But indirectly, I speak also to those you represent, to those who have sent you here, to those who have entrusted their future to your hands. I greatly desire that my words shall strike an echo also in those hearts, in the deep heart of humanity, in that great heart from which has been brought so many shouts of joy, so many cries of sorrow and despair, and so much love and laughter. Today it is President Soekarno who addresses you. But more than that, though, it is a man, Soekarno, an Indonesian, a husband, a father, a member of the human family. I speak to you on behalf of my people, those 92 million people of a distant and wide archipelago, those 92 million people who have lived a life of struggle and sacrifice, those 92 million people who have built a state upon the ruins of an empire. They and the people of Asia and Africa, of the American continent and the European continent and the people of the Australian continent, they are watching and listening and hoping. They see in this organization of the United Nations a hope for the future and a prospect of the present. The decision to attend this session of the General Assembly was not an easy one for me to take. My own nation faces many problems, and time to solve those problems is always short. However, this is perhaps the most important assembly yet held, and all of us have a responsibility to the rest of the world as well as to our own nations. None of us can escape this responsibility, and surely none wish to. I am very sure that the leaders of the younger and the reborn nations can make a very positive contribution to the solution of the many problems facing this organization and the world at large. Indeed, I am confident that man may once again say the new world is called to redress the balance of the old. It is clear today that all major problems of our world are interconnected. Colonialism is connected to security. Security is connected to the question of peace and disarmament. Disarmament is connected to the peaceful progress of the underdeveloped countries. Yes, all are connected and interconnected. If we succeed in finally solving one problem, then the way to the solution of all the others will be open. If we succeed in solving, for example, the problem of disarmament, then the necessary funds will be available to assist those nations which so urgently need assistance. 5 years ago, 29 nations of Asia and Africa sent their representatives to the Indonesian city of Bandung. 29 nations of Asia and Africa. Today, how many free peoples are there? I will not count them, but look around this chamber now. Then tell me whether I am right or not when I say that this is the time of the building of nations and the time of the emergence of nations. Yesterday, Asia, and that is a process not yet completed. Today, Africa, and that too is a process not yet completed. For 15 years now, the West has known peace, or at least the absence of war. Of course, there have been tensions. Yes, there has been danger. But the fact remains that in the midst of a revolution engulfing 3/4 of the world, the West has been at peace. Both great blocs, in fact, have successfully practiced coexistence for all those years, thus contradicting those who deny the possibility of coexistence. We of Asia, I repeat, we of Asia, we have not known peace. After peace came to Europe, we endured atomic bombs. We endured our own national revolution in Indonesia. We endured the torment of Vietnam. We suffered the torture of Korea. We still suffer the agony of Algeria. Is it now to be the turn of our African brothers? Are they to be tortured while our wounds are still unhealed? And yet, the West is still at peace. Do you wonder that we now demand, yes, demand respite from our torment? Do you wonder that now my voice is raised in protest? We, who were once voiceless, have demands and requirements. We have the right to be heard. We are not subject of barter, but living and virile nations with a role to play in this world and a contribution to make. Imperialism is not yet dead. People sometimes say imperialism and colonialism is dead. No, imperialism is not yet dead. It is dying. Yes, the tide of history is washing over its battlements and undermining its foundations. Yes, the victory of independence and nationalism is certain. Still, and mark my words well, the dying imperialism is dangerous as the wounded tiger in a tropical jungle. I tell you this, and I am conscious of speaking now for my Asian and African brothers. The struggle for independence is always justified and always just. Those who resist that irresistible onward march of national independence and self-determination are blind. Those who seek to reverse what is irreversible are dangerous to themselves and to the world. Until these facts, and they are facts, are recognized, there will be no peace in this world and no release of tension. I appeal to you please place the authority and the moral power of this organization of states behind those who struggle for freedom. Do that clearly. Do that decisively. Do that now. Do that, and you will gain the full and wholehearted support of all men of goodwill. Do that now, and future generations will applaud you. I appeal to you, to all members of the United Nations, move with the tide of history. Do not try to stem that tide. Then it is the testing of those weapons. I know that there is scientific disagreement about the genetical effect of those tests. That disagreement, however, is in terms of the numbers affected. It is agreed that there are evil genetical effects. Have those who authorize the test ever seen the results of what they do? Have they looked at their own children and thought about those results? At the present time, the testing of nuclear weapons is suspended. Not, mark you well, not forbidden, but only suspended. Let that fact serve as a beginning then. Let that fact serve as the basis for prohibition of testing, and then for real disarmament. Before leaving the subject of disarmament, I must make one more comment. To speak of disarmament is good. Seriously, to attempt the making of a disarmament agreement would be better. Best of all would be the implementation of an agreement on disarmament. However, let us be realistic. Even the implementation of a disarmament agreement would not guarantee peace to this sore and troubled world. Peace will come only when the causes of tension and conflict are removed. If there is a cause for conflict, then men will fight with pointed sticks if they have no other weapon. I know, because my own nation did that very thing during our struggle for independence. We fought then with knives and pointed sticks. In order to make peace, we must remove the causes of tension and of conflict. That is why I spoke deep from my heart about the necessity of cooperation to bring about the final and glorious end of imperialism. Where there is imperialism and where there are simultaneously armed forces, then the position is a dangerous one indeed. Again, I speak from experience. That is the situation in West Irian. That is the situation in the 1/5 of our national territory which still labors under imperialism. There in West Irian, we have imperialism and the armed forces of imperialism. Bordering that territory, our own troops stand guard by land and sea. Those two bodies of troops face each other. And I tell you, that is an explosive situation. Very recently, those young and misguided troops who were in West Irian defending an outmoded conception were reinforced by an aircraft carrier, the Karl Doorman, from their remote homeland. I tell you that then the situation became positively dangerous. I tell you in all seriousness, the situation in West Irian is a dangerous situation, an explosive situation. It is a cause of tension and it is a threat to peace. General Nasution is not responsible for that. Our soldiers are not responsible for that. Soekarno is not responsible for that. Indonesia is not responsible for that. No, the threat to peace springs directly from the very existence of colonialism and imperialism. Remove those checks to freedom and emancipation, and the threat to peace disappears. Eradicate imperialism, and the world becomes immediately and automatically a cleaner place, a better place, a more secure place. Build the world fit for the dreams and the ideals of humanity. Break now with the past, for the day is at its dawning. Break now with the past, so that we can justify ourselves with the future. I pray God Almighty will bless and guide the deliberations of this assembly. I thank you all.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Mr. President, it gives me great pleasure to extend to you my sincere congratulations on your unanimous election as President of the 47th session of the General Assembly. To your distinguished predecessor, His Excellency Ambassador Shamir S. Shihabi, I should like to convey our deep appreciation for the exemplary manner in which he has presided over the last session. I am also pleased to see our eminent Secretary General, His Excellency Mr. Boutros Ghali, by your side. His incisive analysis of the impediments to the realization of the full potential of the United Nations and his recommendations on how to strengthen its capacity to maintain peace, to secure independence and justice, and foster generalized prosperity in the world, as contained in his report, Agenda for Peace, indeed deserve our serious consideration. We welcome the new members in our midst: Armenia, Azerbaijan, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Croatia, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Moldova, San Marino, Slovenia, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. Their accession to membership not only bring us ever closer to the goal of true universality of our organization, it also underscores the unflagging hope which humanity reposes in this multilateral forum for resolving the global issues of our time. Mr. President, it is my privilege and responsibility to bring to this Assembly a message from the developing countries belonging to the non-aligned movement. I come to you from the 10th Conference of the Heads of State or Government of the non-aligned countries, which Indonesia had the distinct honor to host earlier this month. It was the largest non-aligned summit ever convened. I'm honored, therefore, to address this august assembly not only on behalf of the 180 million people of Indonesia, but also on behalf of the non-aligned movement, which counts 108 members, representing the vast majority of the humankind and close to 2/3 of the membership of this assembly. On behalf of the leaders of the movement, whose consensus views were summed up in what was come to be known as the Jakarta Message, may I convey to you its gist. As a political coalition encompassing more sovereign states than has any other grouping in history, we shall not be mere spectators, nor accept to be sidelined in the currents of historical change now sweeping across the globe. we commit ourselves to the shaping of a new international order, free from war and poverty, intolerance and injustice, a world order based on the principles of peaceful coexistence and genuine interdependence, one that takes into account the diversity of the social systems and cultures of the world. We pledge to seek that new international order through the central and irrepressible instrumentality of the United Nations. Holding fast to the principles of the movement, as first articulated at Bandung 37 years ago, we affirmed the fundamental rights of every human being and every nation to development, to social progress, and to full participation in the shaping of their common destiny. Through dialogue and cooperation, our movement will seek to place itself as a vibrant, constructive, and interdependent component of the mainstream of international relations, so that a new international order could take shape on a truly universal basis, ensuring harmony, peace, justice, and prosperity for all. This is the essence of the Jakarta message. Permit me now to make a few elaborations. The comprehensive decisions and positions adopted by the 10th Non-Aligned Summit, as recorded in its final documents, constitute both a response and an initiative, a dynamic adaptation in the face of the challenges and opportunities posed by the profound and radical developments that have transformed the patterns of international relationships. To a large extent, the non-aligned movement contributed to these global transformations. The unrelenting drive that it imparted to the worldwide decolonization process and to the struggle against racism hastened the demise of colonial empires, the rise of numerous newly independent states, and the retreat of the inhuman policy of apartheid. And yet, the world today is still far from being a peaceful, just, and secure place. Simmering disputes, violent conflicts, aggression and foreign occupation, interference in the internal affairs of states, policy of hegemony and domination, ethnic strife, religious intolerance, new forms of racism, and narrowly conceived nationalism continue to obstruct the building of harmonious coexistence among states and peoples, and have even led to disintegration of states and societies. A profoundly anguishing example is that of the former Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, whose breakup has led to the formation of separate independent states, three of which, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Croatia, and Slovenia, have since become members of the United Nations. On these explosive and tragic crises in various parts of the world, our movement has taken a clear stand. We have called for speedy and resolute action to end the carnage in Bosnia-Herzegovina and condemned the massive atrocities and violations of human rights being committed against the people of that republic, especially its Muslim population. We have also condemned the repugnant policy of ethnic cleansing, reaffirmed the inadmissibility of aggression and the acquisition of territory by force, and called for the full respect for the sovereignty, independence, territorial integrity, and cultural identity of Bosnia-Herzegovina. We have launched collective action to help alleviate the immense suffering of the people of Somalia and to play a critical role in the search for a comprehensive solution to the fratricidal conflict in that land. We have reiterated our unflinching support for the struggle of the Palestinian people under the leadership of the PLO to realize their inalienable right to self-determination, independence, and sovereign statehood in their own homeland. We call on the world community to prevail upon Israel to contribute to the search for peace through the implementation of the United Nations Security Council resolutions that provide for the withdrawal of Israel from all occupied Palestine and Arab lands. And once again, we stress the imperative of ending once and for all the universally condemned system of apartheid and of establishing a non-racial, democratic, and united South Africa. Having welcomed the end of the Gulf War and the restoration of Kuwait's sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity, we have urged the commencement of a process of reconciliation that would finally heal the wounds of war and restore stable peace and harmonious cooperation in that region. While we rejoiced at the establishment of the transitional government of the Islamic State of Afghanistan, the 10th summit noted with regret that the process towards national reconciliation and the establishment of a permanent government through free and fair elections is still marred by continuing internecine strife. We hope that these obstacles would soon be overcome so that peace could be restored and national reconstruction could commence. On Cambodia, we have reiterated our confidence in the determination and capability of the Cambodian people under the leadership of His Royal Highness Samdech Norodom Sihanouk and the members of the Supreme National Council, with the assistance of the United Nations Transitory Administrative Council, to uphold the Paris Agreements in their balanced totality. We remain convinced that the Paris Agreements are still the best basis for the achievement of a comprehensive, just, and durable peace in Cambodia based on national reconciliation and reconstruction. Only through its strict implementation will it be possible to bring to an end the protracted war that has inflicted unspeakable suffering and devastation on the Cambodian people. Mr. President, a world caught in the throes of pervasive change and transition is basically an unstable and unpredictable world. The movement, therefore, has resolved to intensify its efforts in the field of disarmament. While it is true that there has been encouraging progress in limiting nuclear and conventional armaments, the armament agenda is still largely unfinished. A nuclear weapons-free world has always been the vision of our movement, for until that is achieved, the threat to human survival will continue to cast its shadow over all other endeavors and aspirations. We have urged accelerated efforts on other priority disarmament issues, particularly the prohibition of all weapons of mass destruction. Besides posing an acute danger to world peace and security, a continuing global arms race and unbridled military spending also constitute a huge drain on national economies and on the world economy. Our movement has consistently maintained that the resources released through disarmament and arms reductions should be redirected towards the social and economic development of all countries, especially the developing countries. The establishment of such productive linkage between disarmament and development will also make it possible to attain security at lower levels of armament. We should now recognize that peace and security depend as much on socio-economic as on military factors. Sharply reduced prospects for economic and social advancement, large-scale unemployment, abject poverty, massive cross-border migrations, and severe environmental degradation also endanger peace. We cannot hope to attain comprehensive security and stable peace without making substantive progress in the war against poverty, underdevelopment, disease, and social justice. That is why it should deeply concern us that the world economy is marred in sluggish and uneven growth. With a few exceptions, developing countries are experiencing stagnation or vastly inadequate growth rates, with the most vulnerable ones slumping into sharp decline. Most alarming is the prolonged critical situation in Africa, where the plight of millions requires speedy and decisive action. Africa deserves our special attention. Developing countries in general are severely hampered by an unfavorable external economic environment, characterized by inadequate access to technology, unabated protectionism, historically low prices for commodities and raw materials, severely contracted financial flows, and the crushing burden of external debt, resulting in reversed financial flows to the developed countries and the multilateral financial institutions. The external debt crisis of the developing countries has intensified in magnitude and global impact and is being exacerbated by volatile exchange rate fluctuations in the major currencies and high interest rates. Debt reduction schemes that have been tried are far from inadequate, as they need to be broadened to include all kinds of debts and all categories of debtors, including those which have made great efforts to meet their debt obligations. A differentiated approach should be adopted that would allow debt cancellation for the least developed countries and more generous terms in both debt servicing and new concessional loans to lower income developing countries. Our movement will continue to press for a coordinated and development-oriented approach to the solution of this problem. that would bring relief as well as allow the recovery and continued growth of the debtor countries. Each global developments that appear to imply positive prospects could impact negatively on the developing countries. The transformation of Central and Eastern European economies and the formation of powerful groupings among developed countries could deflect the focus on poverty elevation in developing countries and adversely affect their trade and growth process. Particularly lamentable is the continuing impasse in the Uruguay round of multilateral trade negotiations. The non-aligned movement has therefore called on the developed countries to ensure without further delay a balanced, equitable, and satisfactory conclusion of the Uruguay round, which takes into account the interest of all parties, especially the development needs and concerns of the developing countries. Mr. President, we, the non-aligned countries, realize too well that global problems are interlinked, especially in the economic sphere. And because most of today's problems are global in nature, they cannot be solved through short-term relief measures or through piecemeal reform. Hence, it is time that the countries of both the North and the South forged a new compact on development and a new democratic partnership in fashioning global solutions to these global problems. Only in this way we can deliver the world economy from its present disarray and to do away with the inequitable international structure and modalities that have resulted in deepening disparities and unacceptable injustices in international economic relations and inexorably widening prosperity and technology gap between the developed and developing countries. Only in this way can we hope to restructure the international economic system and international economic relations so as to make them more equitable and thus more viable. We, the non-aligned countries, have therefore called for a revival of the constructive dialogue between the North and the South. But at this time, the dialogue should be based on the imperative of genuine interdependence, mutuality of interests, and of benefits and shared responsibility, with the positions of each side clearly elaborated and presented and rationally discussed and negotiated. Never before have the fate and fortunes of the North and the South been so inextricably intertwined. In the absence of stability and development in the South, the North cannot hope to sustain its economic prosperity. Without a conducive global environment, which the policies of the North should provide, the South cannot achieve its development goals. Thus, common sense dictates the need for both sides to sit down and discuss how together they could manage the massive changes and challenges of the decades ahead. At the same time, we have resolved to intensify South-South cooperation on the basis of collective self-reliance. This is imperative for South-South cooperation is vital for promoting our own development and for reducing undue dependence on the North. It is also an integral element in any strategy for the attainment of a new and equitable international economic order. Towards this end, we are initiating concrete cooperative ventures in such areas as food security, population, trade and investments, and devising practicable modalities for their implementation. By thus pooling the resources, expertise, and experiences of the South, we hope to translate the concept of collective self-reliance into reality. We invite the developed countries and the multilateral financial institutions to support us in this endeavor. For it should be clear that the fostering of expanded economic cooperation among the developing countries will in turn impart added vitality to the growth and expansion of the world economy as a whole and yield corresponding benefits to the developed countries as well. Mr. President, a global concern that requires the heightened attention of the international community is the rapid degradation of the environment. We, the non-aligned countries, welcome the results of the Rio Conference. They confirmed the long-held conviction of our movement that the issues of environment and development are inseparable and should be integrally addressed on the basis of equitably shared responsibility. The pursuit of environmentally sound and sustainable development will require a global partnership which will have to address the need of developing countries for commensurate additional financial resources as well as access to environmentally sound technology. Even more important is the effective implementation of the agreed policies, which will require constant monitoring and consistent follow-through. In this context, we welcome the establishment of the High-Level Commission on Sustainable Development. We also believe that social development is no less vital than political and economic development. We therefore support the convening of a World Summit on Social Development, which should place the social needs of people at the heart of the United Nations endeavors. The full and equal integration of women into the development process has always been a goal in the non-aligned movement. Consequently, we shall fully cooperate in ensuring the success of the World Conference on Women in 1995. We believe that all children should be nurtured at a standard of living that is adequate for their health and well-being. We shall work for this as a matter of moral imperative and commit ourselves to the full and effective implementation of the Declaration and Plan of Action of the World Summit for Children. Mr. President, at Jakarta, the non-aligned countries enunciated an unequivocal stand on human rights. Allow me to quote from the Jakarta message. We reaffirm that basic human rights and fundamental freedoms are of universal validity. We welcome the growing trend towards democracy and commit ourselves to cooperate in the protection of human rights. We believe that economic and social progress facilitate the achievement of these objectives. No country, however, should use its power to dictate its concept of democracy and of human rights, or to impose conditionalities on others. In the promotion and protection of these rights, we emphasize the interrelatedness of the various categories, call for a balanced relationship between individual and community rights, uphold the competence and responsibility of national governments in their implementation. The non-aligned countries, therefore, shall coordinate their positions and actively participate in the preparatory work for the Second World Conference on Human Rights in June 1993, in order to ensure that the conference addresses all aspects of human rights on the basis of universality, indivisibility, impartiality, and non-selectivity. Moreover, it is our firm conviction that the objective of human rights is the realization of the full potential of the human being, and human potential is not confined to the political. The fundamental right to economic and social development, for example, cannot be separated and cannot be treated separately from the other categories of human rights. And these rights apply to nations as well as to individuals. Equally, every nation has the right to determine its own political and economic system and to preserve its cultural identity as shaped by its own particular historical experience. The advanced countries of the West have lately been vocal in calling for democracy and good governance as an integral part of the development process, especially in the developing countries. Some are even inclined to make it a new conditionality in development cooperation. The call for democratization and democratic reform in all countries is indeed valid, for it relates directly to the basic aspirations of individuals and nations. But democracy is not a static concept, limited to certain established forms and practices. Its basic principles and tenets are indeed of universal and immutable validity, but no single model of democracy can be assumed to be of universal applicability, given the diversity of cultural values and historical experiences of the nations of the world. Moreover, it would be a denial of the basic tenets of democracy if its values are to be strictly observed within nations while they are being ignored among nations. Hence, democracy and democratization are dynamic processes that should be in conformity with the fundamental values of each nation and constantly adapted to the evolving realities in order to remain relevant and, more importantly, democratic. These observations equally apply to the United Nations. That is why the non-aligned movement has always insisted that this multilateral organization should likewise reflect the democratic spirit of equality, equity, and transparency in representation as well as in the process of decision-making. Therefore, the United Nations and its principal organs should periodically undergo a process of review and revitalization in order to ensure its dynamic adaptation to the evolving realities of international life, and so that it may continue to play an effective role as the focal point of the management of the critical global issues of our time. We, the non-aligned countries, have therefore resolved to play an active and constructive role in the revitalization, restructuring, and democratization of the United Nations system. For this purpose, we have decided to establish a high-level working group charged with the elaborations of concrete proposals for the restructuring of the United Nations. We believe that a balanced relationship among the General Assembly, the Security Council, the Economic and Social Council, and the Secretary General is imperative. There should be greater accountability of the Secretary Council to the General Assembly on decisions and actions affecting the interest of the entire international community. The role of the General Assembly as a forum for deliberation, negotiation, and decision-making must be enhanced. It is our conviction that the United Nations capacity for enhancing international development and cooperation should be strengthened by revitalizing the Economic and Social Council. We believe that the Office of the Secretary General should be provided the resources that are commensurate to its tasks, which have vastly expanded as a result of recent world events. The Secretary General's mandate should be enlarged so as to enable him to take the necessary initiatives in the pursuit of preventive diplomacy and in enhancing the efficacy of United Nations peacemaking, peacekeeping, and peace-building operations. We believe also that it is time to address the matter of the size and composition of the Security Council. This, we realize, should be done in circumspection, for it involves a fundamental aspect of the organization's purposes and functions. When the Charter of the United Nations was framed and its organs established in 1945, the main preoccupation of its founding members, and rightly so, was that never again should the scourge of war be allowed to devastate humankind. They therefore envisioned a collective security system that they thought could be capable of preventing another world war. Since then, however, the world has changed in a most profound way. Over the past 47 years, numerous nations achieved their independence and joined the United Nations as sovereign member states, thus giving the organization near universality in its composition. Their entry reflected the universal drive of peoples and to liberate themselves from colonial bondage. But what was the ultimate goal of their struggle? They fought for political independence not because it was an end unto itself, but because it was the necessary condition for the attainment of a further and larger goal, which is development. Those who fought for independence invariably had a vision of their own people attaining the blessings and the dignity of economic and social progress, which was not and is never possible in a state of political subjugation. In a very real sense, true freedom is attained only through development, and the formal trappings of political independence are empty until they are substantiated by economic and social progress. While it may be true that colonialism in its classical form has virtually come to an end, the process of decolonization is not yet finished until economic independence is achieved. Thus, if in the past the major preoccupation of the United Nations was rightly the prevention of another world conflagration and the political liberations of peoples from political bondage, today the world, and therefore the United Nations, should be seized with the struggle of all countries for national development. This preoccupation should be reflected in the work of the United Nations and the composition and dynamics of its organs, in particular the Security Council. We live in an age of development where economic power has become more decisive than ever. We live in a world where billions of people in the developing countries of the South are beginning to assert their right to realize their economic and social potential. We believe, therefore, that the Security Council should be expanded to accommodate new members who, if they are not be given veto powers, should at least serve as permanent members. They should join the Council on the basis of a combination of relevant criteria that more faithfully reflect the world situation today. That means the criteria should also take into account the changing concept of security, which has now to emphasize the economic and social aspects as much as the military. We cannot close our eyes to the fact that economic policies of industrialized countries and the economic weight of the developing countries, particularly the most populous among them, have as much bearing to international peace and security as the armaments of the military powers. We further believe that it may also be timely and pertinent that the manner in which the veto powers are presently exercised should be subjected to a constructive review. Mr. President, the full elaboration of the meaning and intent of the Jakarta message will be found not in our speeches, but in the concrete work of the movement in the days to come. It is a momentous task that we have to undertake, the building of a new world order dedicated to peace as well as to justice, to security as well as to development, to democracy both within and among states, and to the promotion of the fundamental rights of nations as well as of individual human beings. Let me re-emphasize that to the non-aligned countries, any new international order is viable and commonly acceptable only if based on the recognition of the United Nations as its centerpiece and its universal framework, and if rooted in the fundamental principles of the United Nations Charter. This endeavor will take more than the best exertions of any single country or any group of countries. But with the help of God Almighty, with the support and participation of all nations that share our common aspirations, we shall, God willing, achieve that new international order. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
In our pursuit of national development, once the major powers behave in a more just manner and make clear their impartiality in the Middle East, then most of the root causes of terrorism perpetrated in the name of Islam, which in any circumstances cannot be justified, would have been resolved.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Madam President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor for me to stand once again before this august body, the last time that I do so during my 2 terms as President of Indonesia. I could not agree more with the chosen theme of this session, delivering and implementing transformative post-2015 development agenda. The theme, which is very much in line with work of the high-level panel I was privileged to co-chair. In the past 15 years, the international community has embarked on an ambitious grand project for humanity, the Millennium Development Goals. Our hard work over the years have produced achievements which include breakthrough in combating poverty, increasing school enrollment, and improving public health. These achievements are encouraging and in some instances inspiring. But humanity as a whole have not achieved all the MDGs target. Successes are uneven. They differ between regions, they differ within regions, and they even differ within countries. We have come a long way, yet we still have a long way to go. For those who made it and those who are yet to make it, I learned one best lesson. The most important drivers of change lies in governance. Not just good governance, but smart governance. Smart governance usually involves innovative leadership and active public participation. Without at least these 2 elements, all the hard work we put in will not produce desired result. And with smart governance, nations can go beyond their potential and leapfrog over others ahead of them. In Indonesia, beyond our wildest imagination, we have managed to increase our national income per capita by 400% within just a short decade. The quest for MDGs over the last 15 years have also reinforced the need for a more robust global partnership. There were certainly plenty of actions, but somehow our work in the World Trade Organization and the post-Kyoto climate, in reforming the global financial architecture, in reforming the United Nations, and many others have proved to be painstakingly slow. As we set forth a new global agenda for development, I believe we can draw on years of trial and error to become more acutely aware of the promise and pitfalls of development, of what we want and what we do not want. We do not want development that measures progress in terms of material provisions alone and end up dehumanizing and marginalizing our citizens. What we want is sustainable development with equity. Yet the importance of our work lies beyond the issue of development, as we are now also confronted with yet another major problems. We are witnessing a worrying deterioration in the relation between the major powers. None of us, certainly not the United Nations, can afford to bury our head in the sand about this grim development. This is worrying, as for over 2 decades since the fall of the Berlin Wall, the world has actually witnessed a series of promising turn of events. Most fundamental is the fact that improved relation among major powers had created ample space for new strategic and economic opportunities. Thus, global trade reached $23 trillion for a most sixfold growth in a year after the end of the Cold War in 1990. The fastest growth was during the period that coincides with the pursuit of the MDGs from 2000 to 2013, which 1.5 times as fast as the preceding 2 decades. As to global investment, the value reached almost 1.5 trillion in 2013 for a near sevenfold growth since 1990. In Southeast Asia, this positive geopolitical development has allowed us to develop stronger cooperation and evolve the region's architecture. It led to the establishment of East Asia Summit, a vision for the ASEAN community, a progressive ASEAN Charter, a more active ASEAN Regional Forum, and others. Indonesia, too, was able to develop strategic partnership with all the major powers, as well as with many emerging powers. Madam President, I observe that today the international community is concerned about the danger of the old Cold War returning to our fold. Major power relations are worsening, fueled by mutual suspicions. Relations that were previously stable and cooperative are now marked with volatility and tension. And this benefits no one. Therefore, we should not let this become permanent. The major powers, and certainly all of us, have an obligation to work together to resolve the major issues of our time. Just to mention a few, we need to end the suffering of the Palestinians in Gaza and the rest of the occupied territory, and to deliver the still elusive two-state solution. We need to resolve the conflict in Ukraine that is now shaking relations between Russia and the West. And we need to find an effective and durable solution to the ongoing conflicts in Syria and Iraq. To do all this, there must be mutual accommodation. There must be a forward-looking attitude that embraces a win-win predisposition over zero-sum attitude. Diplomacy must take precedence. Trust deficit must be turned into strategic opportunities and confidence building. And it is not enough just to call for peaceful coexistence. That is so 20th century. Here, in the 21st century, we need much more than a condition where world powers merely peacefully coexist. We need them to work passionately together to foster strategic cooperation to tackle global issues. They must begin to turn the trust deficit into a new strategic trust, not just between them, but also with the emerging powers and with all nations of the United Nations. It is possible. I would say yes, a resolute yes. For this is what has transpired in Southeast Asia. In the second half of the 1960s, Southeast Asian nations were poor, divided, insecure, threatened by a war raging in their neighborhood, and ignorant of one another after centuries of separation during the colonial past. The establishment of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, has enabled countries in the region to form the habit of dialogue and consultation with one another and learn to trust one another. Today, we can proudly say that the once divided 10 Southeast Asian nations now belong to the ASEAN 10. Together, they are all drivers of regional affairs, and masters of their own destiny. A number of sensitive interstate and intrastate conflicts were peacefully resolved. Those that remain are being addressed through dialogue and negotiation. And economic interdependence has become the norms of the day. Moreover, Southeast Asia is on the verge of becoming a true community, and we regard this as the apex of strategic trust, which we believe can be replicated everywhere. The cultures of peace and coexistence that we are trying to attain in Indonesia and in the ASEAN region is definitely the antidote to the poison of fundamentalist prejudice and deep intolerance, as practiced by a terrorist group in Iraq and Syria that falsely styles itself as the Islamic State. The ideology of ISIS not only betrays the true teaching of Islam as a religion of peace, it also harms and seriously upsets the Islamic Ummah throughout the world. Madam President, it has been a great privilege to forge closer bonds between Indonesia and all the nations represented in this great assembly, the United Nations. As I look back, I must admit that there remain many challenges that Indonesia has to resolve, and some of our efforts are already on the right track. In a world desperately grappling with climate change, we are progressively and boldly applying a moratorium on deforestation, our important contribution of reducing carbon emission. In a world of economic uncertainty, we have increased our national income per capita by 400% within just a short decade. In a world witnessing rising extremism, Indonesia continues to hold firm to the values of freedom, tolerance, moderation, and multiculturalism that form the basis of our nationhood. In a world still burdened by insurgencies, we have managed to find a permanent peaceful political solution to end the 30-year conflict in the Aceh province. In a world marked by turbulent transition in the Middle East, we have shown time and again to our people and to the world that in Indonesia, democracy, Islam, modernity, and human rights go together. In a world often stigmatized by the past, Indonesia has opened a whole new chapter of peaceful relations with Timor-Leste, peace on equality and mutual respect. And in a world where territorial disputes often erupt into open conflicts, Indonesia has continued to peacefully resolve one by one overlapping maritime borders with Vietnam, with the Philippines, with Singapore and others. Madam President, the Indonesian experience and Southeast Asia's experience underscore the dawn of a new age of globalism for the 21st century, a world which openly embraces change as opposed to being intimidated by it. What the world so desperately needs today is the pioneering spirit, the boldness to break old boundaries and create new frontiers. Given this spirit, I believe humankind can overcome the challenge of climate change, conquer poverty, and eradicate social injustice, hasten the global economic recovery, and create a culture of peace among all faiths, including the Abrahamic faith. And with this spirit, we can hopefully end the cycle of violence, hatred, fear, and humiliation that has made so many conflicts around the world seem intractable for decades and centuries. In saying this, I am neither a utopian nor a blind idealist in understanding international relations, but I do believe that with strong commitment and political will, we can make the impossible possible. As we say in Indonesia, di mana ada kemauan, Di situ ada jalan. Where there is a will, there is a way. We must push the frontiers. Thank you. Thank you. We must push the frontiers of nationalism into new globalism, where we can devise solutions to national, regional, and global issues all at the same time. A new globalism where no nation is left behind and no nation dominates, where rights are protected and responsibilities are met. In a world of new globalism, wars are unthinkable. In the first place, wars are fought because nations play the zero-sum game, where winners take all and losers weep. The game of us against them, where us must win and them must lose, and winners today are losers tomorrow. Let me conclude by saying that now is the time for all of us to get into the serious business of building a new world of peace, prosperity, and justice. The business of making everybody a winner by creating and nurturing the new we, the all-inclusive new we, the new we that leaves no one behind. I thank you.
His Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, Her Excellency Madame Annalena Baerbock, President of the United Nations General Assembly, His Excellency Mr. Moses Abelian, Under-Secretary General for General Assembly and Management, Excellencies, Heads of States, Heads of Governments, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed a great honor for me to stand in this august General Assembly Hall among leaders and representatives who represent almost all of humanity. We differ in race, religion, and nationality, yet we gather together today as one human family. We are here first and foremost as fellow human beings, each created equal, endowed with unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The words of the United Nations Declaration of Independence have inspired democratic movements across continents, including the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution, the Mexican Revolution, the Chinese Revolution, and Indonesia's own struggle and journey to freedom. It also gave birth to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adopted by the United Nations in 1948. All men are created equal was the creed that opened the way to unprecedented global prosperity and dignity. And yet, in our own era of scientific and technological triumphs, an era capable of ending hunger, poverty, and environmental ruin, we also continue to face today grave dangers, challenges, and uncertainties. Human folly, fueled by fear, racism, hatred, oppression, and apartheid, threatens our common future. My country knows this pain. For centuries, Indonesians lived under colonial domination, oppression, and slavery. We were treated less than dogs in our own homeland. We Indonesians know what it means to be denied justice and what it means to live in apartheid, to live in poverty, and to be denied equal opportunity. We also knew what solidarity can do in our struggle for independence, in our fight to overcome hunger, disease, and poverty. The United Nations stood with Indonesia and gave us vital assistance. Decisions made here based on human solidarity by the Security Council and this Assembly gave Indonesia independence, international legitimacy, opened doors, and supported our early development through the efforts of the United Nations Children Fund, the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, the FAO, the World Health Organization, and many, many other United Nations institutions. And because of that, Indonesia today stands on the cusp of shared prosperity and greater equality and dignity. Madam President, Excellencies, our world today is driven by conflict, injustice, and deepening uncertainty. Every day we witness suffering, genocide, and blatant disregard for international law and human decency. In the face of these challenges, we must not give up. As the United Nations Secretary General said, we cannot give up. We cannot surrender our hopes or our ideals. We must draw closer, not drift apart. Together we must strive to achieve our hopes, our dreams. The United Nations was born from the ashes of the Second World War that claimed scores of millions of lives. It was created to secure peace, security, justice, and freedom for all. We remain committed to internationalism, to multilateralism, and to every effort that strengthens this great institution. Today, Indonesia is nearer than ever before to meeting the sustainable development goals of ending extreme poverty and hunger. Because years ago, this very chamber chose to listen and uphold social and economic justice. We will never forget. And today, we must never be silent while Palestinians are denied that same justice and legitimacy in this very hall. Excellencies, Thucydides warned, the strong do what they can, the weak suffer what they must. We must reject this doctrine. The United Nations exist to reject this doctrine. We must stand for all, the strong and the weak. Might cannot be right. Right must be right. Indonesia today is one of the largest contributors to United Peacekeeping Forces. We believe in the United Nations. We will continue to serve where peace needs guardians, not with just words, but with boots on the ground. If and when the United Nations Security Council and this great assembly decide Indonesia is prepared to deploy 20,000 or even more of our sons and daughters to help secure peace in Gaza or elsewhere, in Ukraine, in Sudan, in Libya, everywhere when the peace needs to be enforced, peace needs to be guarded, we are ready. We will take our share of the burden, not only with our sons and daughters, we are also willing to contribute financially to support the great mission to achieve peace by the United Nations. Madam President, Excellencies, I propose to this Assembly a message of hope and optimism, grounded in action and execution. Today, we heard the speech of Madam President, the President of the United Nations General Assembly. Yes, it is true what she said. Without the International Civil Aviation Organization, will we be here today? Will we sit in this great hall? Without the United Nations, we cannot be safe. No country can feel secure. We need the United Nations, and Indonesia will continue to support the United Nations. Even though we still struggle, but we know the world needs a strong United Nations. The world's population is growing. Our planet is under strain. Food, energy, and water insecurity haunt many nations. We choose to answer these challenges directly at home and to help abroad wherever we can. This year, Indonesia recorded the highest rice production and grain reserves in our history. We are now self-sufficient in rice, and we are starting now to export rice to other nations in need, including providing rice for Palestine. We are building resilient food supply chains, strengthening farmer productivity, investing in climate-smart agriculture to ensure food security for our children and for the children of the world. We are confident in a few years' time, Indonesia will be the granary of the world. As the world's largest island state, we testify before you that we are already experiencing the direct consequences of climate change, particularly the threat of rising sea levels. The sea level on the north coast of our capital city is increasing by 5 centimeters every year. Can you imagine in 10 years? Can you imagine in 20 years? For this, we are forced to build a giant seawall, 480 kilometers in length. It will take us maybe 20 years, but we have no choice. We have to start now. Therefore, we choose to confront climate change, not by slogans, but by immediate steps. We are committed to meeting our 2015 Paris Agreement obligations. We aim to achieve net zero emission by 2060, and we are very confident we can achieve net zero emission much earlier. We aim to reforest more than 12 million hectares of degraded forest, to reduce forest degradation, to empower local communities with quality green jobs for the future. Indonesia is shifting decisively from fossil fuel-based development towards renewable-based development. From next year, most of our additional power generation capacity will come from renewables. Our goal is clear: to lift all of our citizens out of poverty and make Indonesia a hub for solutions to food, energy, and water security. Madam President, Excellencies, we live in a time when hatred and violence can seem to be the loudest voices. But beneath this loud noise lies a quieter truth, that every person longs to be safe, to be respected, to be loved, and to leave a better world to their children. Our children are watching. They are learning leadership not from textbook, but from our choices. Today, still, a catastrophic situation in Gaza is unfolding before our eyes. At this very moment, the innocent are crying for help, are crying to be saved. Who will save them? Who will save the innocent? Who will save the old and women? Millions are facing danger at this very moment. As we sit here, they are facing trauma. They are facing irreparable damage to their bodies. They are dying of starvation. Can we remain silent? Will there be no answer to their screams? Will we teach them that the human family can rise to the challenge? Madam President, we must act now. Many speakers have said that. We must stand for a multilateral order where peace, prosperity, and progress are not the privilege of a few, but the right of all. With a strong United Nations, we can build a world where the weak do not suffer what they must, but live the justice that they deserve. Let us continue humanity's great journey of ideals, the selfless aspirations that created the United Nations. Let us use science to uplift, not use science to destroy. Let rising nations help others to lift themselves. I am convinced that the leaders of the great world civilizations of the West, of the East, of the North, of the South, leaders of America, Europe, of India, China, the Islamic world, the whole world, I am convinced they will rise to their role demanded by history. We are all hopeful that the leaders of the world will show great statesmanship, great wisdom, restraint, humility, overcome hate, overcome suspicion. Madam President, distinguished delegates, we are greatly heartened by the events of the last few days, where significant leading countries of the world have chosen to side with history, to choose the right side of history, the path of the moral high ground, the path of rectitude, the path of justice, the path of humanity, to shun hatred, to overcome suspicion, and to avoid the use of violence. The use of violence will beget violence. No one country can bully the whole community of the human family. We may be weak individually, but the sense of oppression, the sense of injustice has proven in the history of mankind that this sense of injustice, this sense of oppression will unite into a strong force that will overcome this oppression, that will overcome this injustice. To close, I would like to reiterate again Indonesia's complete support for the two-state solution in Palestine. We must have an independent Palestine, but we must also recognize, we must also respect, and we must also guarantee the safety and security of Israel. Only then we can have real peace, and no longer hate and no longer suspicion. The only solution is this two-state solution. two descendants of Abraham must live in reconciliation, peace, and harmony. Arabs, Jews, Muslims, Christians, Hindus, Buddhists, all religions, we must live as one human family. Indonesia is committed to being part of making this vision a reality. Is this a dream? Maybe, but this is the beautiful dream that we must work together towards. Let us work towards this noble goal. Let us continue humanity's journey of hope, a journey started by our forefathers, a journey that we must complete. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom. Om Santi, Santi, Santi Om. Namo Buddhaya. Thank you very much. May God bless us all. May peace be upon us. Thank you very much.